Hey Sopranos fans, welcome to another episode here on Sopranos Street, and today we will be taking a look at Dr. Melfi. More specifically, why did she really dump Tony? It's very easy when watching the series to assume that she took in and treated Tony for years, despite opposition from many of the people in her life, only to eventually realize that she was being fooled and dropped him as a patient in a very angry and unprofessional manner. But is it really that straightforward? In evaluating the answer, we will focus on why she took him in as a patient, why she took him back after she had to go on the run, and why she dumped him for the final time. Also, we will look into the specific points made by her colleagues and the study that supposedly led to that decision. It's important to note here that I am not a psychiatrist, so if any are watching and want to comment, please do so, and also please stay till the end because I have a question for all of the viewers. When looking into why Dr. Melfi took Tony on as a patient, I think it's safe to say she did so in good faith and with the best intentions. You could be cynical and say that she did it in an effort to meet the real big shot that she's been after for decades, Rusty Millio.
Who the hell do you think you are, Frankie Valli, or some kind of big shot?
Just in case you didn't know, Rusty was played by Frankie Valli. But realistically, while she showed a definite fascination with Tony, as did everyone watching the show, she took him on with good intentions. Whatever her reasons may have been, the dilemma that would come to define her relationship with Tony on a professional level, as well as many of the ironies involved in the issue, are laid out fairly bluntly and early in the series during the Melfi dinner and later therapy session in The Legend of Tennessee Multisanti. Richard lays out the problem.
Well, you know you can't treat sociopaths. He's scum and you shouldn't help him with his bedwetting.
And the therapist agrees in session, but they both show some level of hypocrisy, or at the very least irony, while doing so. Richard, who is overly concerned with stereotyping Italians, does so immediately.
Italian males seeing a shrink. Let me guess. Mother issues.
He also doesn't make any corrections to the immediate assumption that her patient was in the mob.
Why wouldn't you say it, Ma?
Well, you just wouldn't. What, you'd be scared? Is he in the mafia?
And in fact plays into it during the very same conversation in which he was complaining about how Italians are always associated with the mafia. The family therapist even displays his level of fascination with the life before advising her to dump Tony.
You know, on my mother's side, we have a few dark sheep. Louis Lepke, Buckhalter. You know, Murder Incorporated. Those were some tough Jews.
Shabbos!
Now, while Melfi's defiant side probably had some part in her decision to keep seeing Tony, she immediately responded with an equally valid point.
Oh, for Christ's sake, Richard, you too, Sam. When did we become so afraid to get our hands dirty?
And this was the situation she faced. You can't treat him versus let's get our hands dirty. Personally, I think Richard had it right in the same episode.
Man's a criminal, Jennifer. And after a while, finally you're going to get beyond psychotherapy with its cheesy moral relativism. Finally you're going to get to good and evil. And he's evil.
But on a professional level, I can see Melfi embracing Einstein's statement that only those who attempt the absurd can achieve the impossible, and deciding to dig in despite the opposition. But things went awry in the Jersey mob, and she had to go into hiding, she lost a patient, and she dropped Tony as a patient. At this point, she could be free, theoretically, to go on her way. So why did she take him back? She initially brings up that she abandoned him, which could be a legitimate reason, but after that, problems begin to appear.
I think seeing him again will be very therapeutic for me.
It's obvious that she is seeking something out of this other than professional satisfaction, and even Elliot points out how she may be drawn to him, hinting towards a parallel with her alcohol use. So it's of no surprise that she's drinking when she calls Tony to see if he wants to come back. Now, while this may reinforce the parallel with alcoholism, it doesn't necessarily mean she isn't still trying to get her hands dirty, so to speak, and she probably still genuinely thinks she can help Tony. So it's probably a little bit of both as to why she took him back as a patient. And this brings us to the point where she supposedly dumps Tony for good. I'll get back to the supposedly later. When evaluating why, we will be focusing on three main events. First, the last session Melfi had with Elliot. Second, the dinner in which she was embarrassed, as well as her reading of the study afterwards. And third, her last session with Tony. At the point where Melfi dumps Tony, there are only two possible reasons for her doing so. One, that she finally realized that he couldn't be helped, as everyone had been telling her all along, or that she was thoroughly embarrassed by having what she realized by that point was akin to an addiction to Tony brought to light in public. similar to her drunken outburst while eating out with Jason. She wasn't embarrassed that she was drinking, she was embarrassed that other people saw. And not just her son and a bunch of strangers like last time, but friends, family, and colleagues. Either way, let's take a look at the reasons given by her colleagues and the study that she uses as her justification for dropping Tony. First, in her meeting with Elliot, after she quoted Tony in much the same context as Tony would have used it himself, Elliot brings up the study.
A lot of studies about talk therapy as it relates to sociopaths and criminals. Essentially, it concludes that talk therapy, while not only being useless with sociopaths, actually serves to validate them. Yoshelson says they sharpen their skills as con men on their therapists. We showed data. The 1-year reconviction rates were higher for offenders in therapy than for those receiving no treatment at all.
Quick side note, I think you could argue that if the rates were higher for those in therapy, that they weren't really sharpening their skills, were they? If anything, they came out duller. But either way, 2 new issues were brought up during the dinner.
This other, I think it was Robert Hare, suggested that sociopaths actually quite glibly engage on key issues like mother, family.
I had a guy at the state asylum, slow poisoner. They even mimic empathy.
On another side note, I think it's ironic that Elliot speaks condescendingly about the morals of psychiatry with regards to her treating Leadbelly, but brushes off the fact that he just gave out information that Melfi gave him in private as his patient by telling her to relax and that they're all friends. Later after the dinner, Melfi reads up on the study and the audience is keyed into 3 main points. First, the criminal shows sentimentality through animals and babies. Second, that they use insight gained in therapy to justify heinous acts. And third, which is really more of a conclusion than a point, that it has potential for non-criminals, but for criminals, it just becomes another criminal operation. So, at the point of her last session with Tony, here were the reasons she had. 1, that he was using her to sharpen her skills as a con man, but here's the thing, he had told her not long before that he hated his son.
How about the fact that I hate my son?
Which seems incredibly upfront and honest for someone who is only using her to be a better con artist. Next, she recognized that he glibly engaged on key issues such as mom, etc., but here's the thing. Well, 2 things really. 1, Tony's mom was terrible and she knew that, but most importantly, she was the one who usually took the conversation in that direction. She was the one who thought that everything about everyone is because of their mother. Her next point was that he uses insight to justify heinous acts, but he'd been doing that for years, otherwise he would have never made it in the Mafia. He actually tries to use insight from therapy to help people, like when Christopher was depressed, although she wouldn't have seen that. And her last point was recognizing that he showed sentimentality for babies and animals, but so what? So do non-criminals. On the flip side, some non-criminals don't care much for babies or animals, and some criminals will kill them both. That doesn't really tell us anything. Now, she's already made up her mind to drop Tony, but what may have gotten the ball rolling was seeing Tony cry about AJ shortly after saying he hated him. She may have viewed this as fake empathy, but AJ did just attempt suicide, and she wasn't there to see how genuine Tony's reaction really was. So, in that light, it's understandable that she may have felt that way, but Melfi tips her hand in regards to her real reasons at the end of the meeting.
The new big thing these days is called psychodynamic therapy, combined with anafranil.
Who?
A medication. There's a doctor in Bloomfield you could see.
If her reasoning were truly that talk therapy couldn't help Tony, then why refer him to someone else? She did mention that the new treatment is psychodynamic therapy, which I looked up, and it's talking therapy, like Melfi. But she really shows us her reasoning here.
You miss appointments because you don't give a shit about commitments, about what I do, about the body of work that's gone into building up this science.
That's her friends talking. Why would any patient care about the body of work that goes into science? He just wanted to stop passing out, remember? And as for the other things, up to and including his possible personality disorder, she took him back.
You know what? Fuck you. You know who I am, and you know what I do. You called me.
She clearly dumped him because of the embarrassment at dinner and not for any other reasons, and that's why I said supposedly last meeting before. Now, it obviously was the last meeting because the series ended, Tony died, etc., but if The Sopranos had gone on a few more seasons with Tony alive, it would have been in perfect character for her to go back to Tony again, just like she went back to drinking after the embarrassment wore off from her dinner with Jason. Let me know down in the comment section if you think she would have. And I'll end it with my question that I referenced earlier. Do you think I should include things from other movies and shows on this channel, such as my Machiavellian Monday on Vito Corleone, or put them on a different channel? Let me know down in the comments section. As always, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you at the next score.